On the morning of December 18th, something that should have been impossible occurred. Voyager 1, a spacecraft drifting more than 23 billion kilometers from Earth, far beyond the heliosphere's fading boundary, sent back a signal it should never have been able to detect. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't background noise. It was a pattern, and not just any pattern. It was a low-frequency harmonic encoded with geological density markers, a sequence indistinguishable from subsurface scan data from a place more than 6,000 kilometers from Voyager's last known contact zone, the Giza Plateau in Egypt. This was no coincidence. What Voyager 1 detected that cold December morning matched the precise geophysical footprint of something hidden deep beneath the sand, under the long shadow of the Great Pyramids. A structure no human instrument has ever fully mapped, a formation our best radar systems have failed to penetrate. Until now. Its shape remained only theoretical, no more than whispers of strange magnetism, impossible stone alignments, and a handful of classified seismic echoes until Voyager caught it. And that raises a question no scientific agency can answer right now. How did a spacecraft at the edge of interstellar space detect a signal from deep inside Earth? And, more importantly, why did it respond to it? This is not a story about ancient aliens. It is not Atlantis. It is not a recycled fringe myth dressed up as science. This is about data-real harmonics, measurable resonances, sensor anomalies recorded by NASA and by independent geological teams working near Giza in the final months of 2025. And this time, there were 3 separate confirmation points. The first was a gravitational flux spike recorded at 402 a.m. GMT directly beneath Giza. It registered as a minor tremor, ignored by most systems. Except for one detail, it coincided perfectly with Voyager's unexpected frequency burst. The second was a thermal void detected by a European orbital satellite, showing a 8 degrees Celsius drop in a tightly defined cuboid zone about 200 meters below the surface. That zone aligned with the forgotten foundation of an unmarked substructure, listed in ancient maps, then buried by shifting dunes and modern construction. The third was a change in Voyager, one's signal cadence a 0.002-second shift in broadcast interval that persisted for 23 minutes, then returned to normal. This kind of irregularity has appeared only twice in mission history, and both times it coincided with known gravitational lensing events. But this time there was no lens, no star, no black hole, only Earth, only Giza, only silence, and within that silence, something began to pulse. Not noise, not simple energy, mass. Voyager's sensors briefly caught a fluctuating density pattern, mimicking the signature of something immense. Metallic, and older than human architecture, something that echoed signals as if it were alive, or worse, aware. We don't know how, but Voyager 1, a machine built in 1977, powered by a nuclear battery and carrying a gold-plated phonograph, appeared to witness movement beneath Earth's surface. Not near Mars, not in deep space, beneath our feet. That movement centered directly under the Great Pyramid, and it changed the shape of the question we thought we were asking. It rattled long-held assumptions about Earth's geology, electromagnetic layering, and even the strange coupling between deep mass structures and high-orbit signal relays. And now the silence is breaking, because since that moment, seismic probes across the Giza Plateau have recorded non-natural harmonics every 6 hours, clockwork pulses that align perfectly with Voyager's increasing distance from Earth. It is as if something below the surface has locked onto Voyager, not the other way around. This documentary will examine every strange piece of the puzzle. You will see why Voyager's burst is mathematically impossible, how its harmonic sequence implies a blueprint of something massive and hollow, and why some experts believe this could reshape not only archaeology, but physics itself. We will explore the structure beneath Giza, how it first appeared through failed radar surveys, why its geometry resists natural tectonic explanation, and what could cause a cold, perfectly cubic gravitational anomaly 200 meters down. We will trace NASA's internal response, the apparent blackout of satellite data on December 19th, and the resurfacing of ancient manuscripts describing a chamber not made by human hands buried before the Nile ever ran. And, finally, we will ask the hardest question. Did Voyager 1 just complete its original mission? Because that mission was not only to explore space, it was to send back information. And now it is receiving something old, something impossible, something that should not exist beneath the Earth. But it is there, and Voyager found it. The signal has been confirmed. The structure has been measured. The harmonics have repeated, and in the chapters ahead, we will walk through each verified data point. No theories, no fluff, just the signal, just the structure, and the story Voyager 1 was never meant to tell. In deep space, silence is expected. Voyager 1, launched in 1977, has spent decades drifting beyond the planets, carrying humanity's first interstellar message, a golden record encoded with sounds, music, and mathematical patterns meant for any listening intelligence. But its journey, nearly 15 billion miles from Earth, was always supposed to be one way. That distance guarantees one thing: any signal it sends takes more than 20 hours to reach us. What it receives back should be nothing but background radiation, nothing but cold. And yet in the early hours of December 22nd, that expectation fractured. During routine calibration checks at a Deep Space Network station in Canberra, engineers noticed a strange anomaly. It wasn't part of Voyager's active data stream. It was tucked inside a legacy telemetry channel, an unused diagnostic band that hasn't carried meaningful data since the late 1980 seconds. But it wasn't just noise. It had structure, a waveform with clean harmonic intervals, a shape that looked uncomfortably familiar. On closer inspection, the engineers recognized what they were seeing. An echo, a very specific echo, one that mirrored an early Voyager 1 calibration tone used only during the spacecraft's first operational phase. A tone designed to test signal recognition, built from repeating mathematical sequences, prime numbers, harmonic spacings, amplitude modulations, crafted to be detectable by machines, and perhaps by any intelligent system. That tone hadn't been transmitted in over 4 decades, and yet it was here again, returning from somewhere. The first assumption was a local glitch, a telemetry bleed-through. It happens. Old systems sometimes cross paths, especially during diagnostic sweeps. But the spectral signature didn't match a software loop. It didn't match known intermodulation distortion. The waveform wasn't decaying. It was strengthening. And most alarming of all, it was phase stable, too exact to be accidental. Within minutes, engineers switched to redundant tracking stations at Goldstone and Madrid. The signal was not local. It was not coming from Voyager. Triangulation placed its origin on Earth. At first, disbelief slowed the analysis. The idea that a deep space probe's outbound test tone could return as an echo, originating not from the heliopause, not from the interstellar void, but from beneath Earth's crust, was absurd. No known natural process should reflect a signal with that kind of precision. But as the coordinates narrowed, disbelief turned to shock. The echo's source sat almost precisely beneath the Giza Plateau in Egypt, more specifically, within a zone south of the Great Pyramid, at a depth of roughly 200 meters. That location, dismissed in older surveys as geological noise or reflective bedrock, now behaved like a return channel, as if it had been listening. The delay time was wrong for a deep space echo. The waveform was too refined for an accidental bounce, and most critically, the signal returned enhanced, slightly modified, with a subtle shift in amplitude and phase, like a second harmony laid gently atop a bass note. The question became unavoidable. How did something underground respond to a tone only Voyager 1 was ever programmed to emit beneath Egypt's most famous site? An unknown structure had received a test signal meant for the stars, and it had answered not with randomness or static, but with design. This was no longer a technical anomaly. It was an event, one that challenged everything we assume about where echoes can come from, and what might be hidden beneath our feet. And Voyager 1, alone in the dark, seemed to have accidentally awakened something on Earth that no one expected to be listening. Once triangulation completed, every vector pointed to the same place, the Giza Plateau, a landscape so studied, scanned, and mapped that the idea of anything remaining hidden there feels impossible. After centuries of excavation and decades of satellite analysis, we should know every inch of this terrain, especially beneath the Great Pyramid. But the echo didn't rise from the surface, nor from any known shaft or chamber. It came from below, far below, 200 meters down. Near the southern edge of the Great Pyramid's foundation lies a zone repeatedly flagged by radar and seismic surveys as inconclusive. Not empty, not solid, irregular, a region where ground-penetrating radar distorts or simply vanishes. Some call it a blind spot. Others, more cautiously, call it an anomaly. Now it was more than that. It was the confirmed origin point of a returned signal that matched Voyager's harmonic tone, arriving not as random energy, but as measurable structure, suggesting more than passive reflection. It hinted at interaction. The Deep Space Network verified that this zone responded with a coherent pattern, echoing Voyager's test tone with subtle enhancements, phase modulation, cleaner edges, higher fidelity than any natural cavity should produce. Something in that buried region received the pattern, processed it, and sent it back, not instantly, but within a time frame far too short for any known round trip through deep space. Officials at NASA and the European Space Agency first suspected underground infrastructure pipes, conduit, military installations, but Egypt has no known subterranean complexes at that depth near Giza, no tunnels, and certainly nothing with the geometry required to reflect a phased harmonic echo at the correct frequency. That is where the scientific community began to split. One camp insisted it was a fluke, a telemetry echo misattributed through ionospheric refraction or surface conductivity, but electromagnetic engineers reviewing the data found no trace of such distortion. If anything, the signal looked cleaner than it had any right to be, almost too precise for a natural geological environment. The second camp focused on the location itself. Archived satellite scans from the early 2000s, captured by European geophysical mapping initiatives, showed thermal inconsistencies near the same coordinates, a deep cold pocket resistant to seasonal variation. At the time, it was blamed on unusual limestone density. But now that same region matched the triangulation model to within 12 meters. It wasn't a random void. It behaved like a structure. Orbital radar imaging limited at such depth began to suggest an outline, not a cavern, not a jagged pocket, but a symmetrical shell, oval-shaped and uniform. The estimate placed it around 70 meters wide and 30 meters high, encased in dense material that absorbed much of the signal, yet reflected certain frequencies with unsettling selectivity. Strangest of all, the material showed reflectivity consistent with metallic alloy, more like manufactured architecture than natural stone. It returned a phase-stable frequency envelope, something natural formations simply don't do, and that brings weight to where it is. The Giza Plateau is more than geology. It is symbol, monument, myth, and obsession layered together for thousands of years. The Sphinx, the pyramids, the tombs of the Fourth Dynasty. But what if something beneath those symbols predates them? What if the visible monuments were aligned to something older, something already buried? Now a structure that may have slept for millennia has answered not to humans, but to a message meant for deep space. Voyager's signal was never meant to be heard on Earth, and yet something 200 meters below Giza heard it anyway and chose to answer. The tone that returned on December 22nd wasn't just a random ping, it was one of Voyager's most symbolic beacons, a harmonic marker encoded with mathematical symmetry, designed to be recognizable across light years. Regardless of language or biology, its purpose was noble, even poetic to say we exist, that we can speak through math, that we are listening for a reply. Carl Sagan and his team called it a universal fingerprint, a calibration sequence built from prime number spacing, frequency intervals, and mirrored ratios, a tone that could not be mistaken for anything natural. It wasn't music. It wasn't Morse code. It was something in between, a deliberate digital hum, designed for any civilization, any machine, any sensor sophisticated enough to recognize what structure sounds like. But it was never meant to come back, and certainly not from below our own feet. For over 4 decades, that harmonic sequence slept inside Voyager 1's dormant broadcast protocols. It was among the first signals transmitted after launch in 1977, used to test antenna lock and verify a data handshake. Once its job was done, it was shelved, archived in Voyager's memory banks like a ghost of the mission's opening chapter. It had not been broadcast in over 40 years, until now. During a maintenance cycle in early December, NASA engineers reloaded several legacy calibration sequences into Voyager's memory stack, not for broadcast, only for archival checks. The old tone was included as part of a validation script. Somehow, whether by stray leakage or by something more deliberate, that dormant tone was noticed, and something beneath Earth heard it and responded. That alone would be strange. But the returned signal didn't merely copy the tone. It seemed to understand it. The echo from beneath Giza was not identical, not corrupted, not degraded, enhanced. The modulation showed phase alignment. The returning waveform matched the original structure, then amplified its harmonic peaks by a narrow, precise margin. That should not happen unless something recognized the tone's design and chose to mirror it intentionally. It was as if the buried object, whatever it is, had been waiting for a specific song. And when it heard the opening notes, it didn't just echo them, it harmonized. Signal analysts at JPL began layering the original and return tones together. What they found was chilling. The peaks of the incoming signal aligned perfectly with the valleys of the return. In waveform physics, this is called complementary harmonic symmetry, a pattern rarely seen in nature, and never at this frequency in raw geology. It was the sonic equivalent of a handshake. This wasn't an object bouncing back noise. It was an entity or a mechanism answering in kind, and the timing made it stranger still. Voyager's test tone was broadcast during a brief deep space network handoff between Canberra and Madrid. Routine. Except that window placed outbound signals in a narrowband phase state, a less common structure that emphasizes harmonic integrity. In that quiet slice of time, a perfect storm formed. A signal meant for deep space slipped outward, intersected something hidden beneath Earth, and returned enriched with structure no cavern, crystal deposit, or geological fault should be able to produce. And what came back was not noise. It was a message, not a new message, but our own, returned in a different voice, a voice that matched our structure, recognized our math, and layered something else on top, something intentional. Voyager's ancient tone was never meant to call home, but something ancient beneath Giza was already listening. In physics, symmetry is everything. In particles, in orbits, in resonance, symmetry reveals structure, and sometimes intention. The echo Voyager 1 received from beneath Giza wasn't just eerie, it was symmetrical, perfectly, deliberately, unnaturally. So, at first, it was dismissed as coincidence, a phantom signal. But when audio engineers placed the original Voyager tone over the returning echo, something impossible happened. The waves didn't clash. They synchronized. The echo wasn't a simple mirror of the original. It was a harmonic inversion, meaning where Voyager's tone peaked, The echo dipped, where the original softened. The return sharpened, combined. The two tones produced complete harmonic cancellation, destructive interference. That only happens when one signal is shaped to neutralize another. In nature, such precision is rare. In engineered systems like noise-cancelling headphones, it's intentional, generated as an exact opposite to silence what it meets. But in geology, in layered stone and bedrock, it shouldn't happen. Earth doesn't cancel Voyager. Random rock does not do that. And yet, something under Giza did. The echo was also phase-locked, timed with precise synchronization. The delay between Voyager's legacy tone and the underground reply remained constant, down to the microsecond. This was not a fading bounce through atmosphere. It was stable, coherent, a reply that held its shape. More disturbing, the echo carried a faint secondary pulse embedded inside the carrier wave low frequency, narrow band, pulsing in a prime number sequence. Just like the original, this is where comfort begins to thin. If a tone sent from a deep space probe can return with harmonic structure, phase-locked symmetry, and mathematical augmentation, it means one thing: the echo is not merely an echo. It is a response, a delayed, encoded answer, implying more than passive material. It implies design. Engineers at Caltech ran repeated overlays. They compared the returning frequency against dozens of terrestrial phenomena, cave echoes, submarine sonar bounces, man-made reflective structures. Nothing matched. Only one category produced similar behavior: tuned signal cavities built in laboratories, where waveforms are managed by high reflectivity inner surfaces. In other words, chambers built to listen. And the location beneath the Great Pyramid adds another layer of strangeness. This is not just any patch of rock. It is a place steeped in myth, is a legend, and architectural obsession. Ancient scrolls speak of a chamber beneath breathless stone said to reflect the sun's light in silence. Archaeologists call it metaphor. Yet beneath hundreds of feet of limestone, a structure echoed back the language of stars. When light reflects, it bends. When sound reflects, it scatters. But this echo returned organized. It had edges. It had fidelity. It had intent. And the symmetry wasn't only sonic. When modeled visually, the interference mapped into a torus-shaped field, a three-dimensional waveform pattern theorized in only one domain, resonance chambers engineered for energy storage, and this one emerged from 200 meters below Earth's surface. The odds of that being natural are beyond calculation. The odds of it being random are effectively zero. So we are left with a difficult conclusion. Either something buried beneath Giza is a natural structure behaving as though it was built, or it was built long before Voyager ever launched, waiting for a voice like this. And now that voice has been heard. In a world saturated with sensors, you would expect something, anything, to register when a buried structure interacts with a signal tied to deep space. Especially under a site as studied as Giza. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities works alongside multiple seismological institutes, and the region is blanketed with seismic sensors designed to detect even the faintest tremors. Yet on the morning of December 22nd, when Voyager's tone returned with impossible clarity, no ground movement was recorded. Not a tremor, not a microquake, not even the smallest vibration. And that absence may be the most unsettling anomaly of all, because if the returning signal came from a natural underground chamber or cave, especially one modulating a high-frequency echo back through Earth's dense crust, there should have been side effects: vibrational scatter, subsurface echoes, ground coupling distortion. Any ordinary underground response should have left some trace. But the sensors at nearby stations, including the Cairo Seismological Research Center, reported total silence. Their equipment didn't even register a ripple. And that silence matters, because while signal reflection requires no shaking, a return this structured, modulated, phase-locked, and coherent suggests something mechanical, or at least engineered, was involved in the response. A reply like that, if it came from a large chamber or device embedded deep underground, should have disturbed its surroundings. At the very least, it should have shown up as faint surface vibrations, but the Earth remained still. This wasn't just strange, it was unnatural. Seismologists describe Earth's crust as acoustically leaky. It's filled with tiny imperfections, faults, seams, gradients that smear and scatter signals. When sound or pressure travels underground, it breaks apart and blurs across geological layers. No clean signal returns, no crisp bounce, and yet Voyager's tone did bounce, and it came back cleaner than expected. When this contradiction reached the geophysics team at the University of Edinburgh, they ran simulations using Earth models of limestone and granite at the depth in question. Even under ideal conditions, the simulated echo was muddy and unstable. Frayed at the edges by tiny flaws in the virtual rock, it showed none of the signature clarity of the real returning tone. The only way to replicate what happened was to remove Earth's irregularities from the model entirely, to treat the underground space not as nature, but as a perfect signal cavity. In other words, they had to simulate it as if it were built. And then it got stranger. Archived ground-penetrating radar from 1997, taken during a UNESCO-funded subsurface scan of Giza, flagged an anomaly just meters from the echo's triangulated origin. At the time, researchers noted a radar dead zone, a band of ground that inexplicably failed to return any measurable echo. They assumed equipment failure, and the zone was never rescanned. Now, 28 years later, that dead zone aligns exactly with where the returning Voyager signal came from. The alignment is precise, geometrically consistent with the dimensions of a sealed resonance chamber, possibly metallic, possibly crystalline, formed either by extreme coincidence or by deliberate planning. Yet the seismic sensors were blind. The absence of tremors combined with the perfect echo suggests one of two possibilities. Either this structure is isolated from Earth's crust, suspended within a medium that absorbs mechanical noise, or it is actively designed to remain stealthy. That isn't just architectural mastery, that is intentional silence. The Earth did not speak on December 22nd, but something beneath it did not with a quake, but with a whisper sent back toward the stars, as though the signal had found a polished corridor in the dark. When analysts reviewed the strength of the returning echo from beneath the Giza Plateau, one term appeared again and again in their notes: unrealistically clean. The returning tone wasn't just precise, it was bright in the signal sense, stronger than expected, reflective beyond any natural expectation. And when mapped across radar and synthetic aperture imaging, it revealed a clue that defies geologic logic. The echo source reflected energy in a way consistent with metallic surfaces, and more specifically with gold alloys. Let that settle for a moment. 200 meters beneath the Great Pyramid, a structure appears to be coated, lined, or composed of material that reflects electromagnetic waves in a signature pattern matching golden reflectivity. This isn't speculative. High-frequency radar scans measure how much energy returns from a material. Different substances, granite, clay, ice, have different reflectivity profiles. Gold is among the most electromagnetically reflective materials known to science, returning more than 95% of the energy in specific frequency ranges, especially in the radio and microwave spectrum. And the echo pattern from Voyager's returning signal falls directly into that range. The implication is clear: something beneath Giza isn't just echoing back signals by accident, it's amplifying them efficiently, purposefully, with a material that doesn't belong that deep underground. Gold doesn't form in large reflective seams at that depth. It's found in veins, usually dispersed, often with quartz. But no gold mining has ever taken place at Giza. Egypt's major deposits are thousands of kilometers south, in the Nubian desert. The Giza Plateau is composed mainly of limestone and sedimentary rock, neither of which can account for the electromagnetic return properties detected in this case. The question becomes obvious. If natural geology can't explain the return signal's strength and reflectivity, then what can? The only alternative is manufacture. Something reflective, structurally coherent, and highly responsive to electromagnetic tones must exist beneath the surface, behaving in every measurable way like a metallic shell. More unsettling is the shape of the reflective field. It isn't jagged. It isn't scattered. It's smooth. Radar data enhanced through algorithmic surface reconstruction suggests a curved, dome-like geometry oval in footprint, arching upward toward the surface as if capping or shielding something below. Its characteristics imply two distinct possibilities, both difficult to accept. Either it is ancient construction, a chamber or vault built long ago, covered over by centuries of sand and stone, and now buried beyond reach. But if so, who had the metallurgical precision to engineer a signal-reflective vault at that depth, and to align it directly beneath the Great Pyramid? Or it isn't construction at all, but containment, a housing unit, perhaps for something once volatile, something precious, or something dormant. In this view, the reflectivity isn't decoration, its function is a shield, a boundary, a receiver. Historical records do little to help. There are no mentions in dynastic Egyptian texts of deep underground chambers made of metal. The deepest tombs found in the Valley of the Kings don't approach this depth, and gold was revered in Egypt, but used sparingly ritually, ornamentally, never structurally. So why is a reflector matching gold's signature buried beneath one of the oldest stone monuments on Earth, and why did it choose now? After 4,000 years of silence, to return a signal that was never aimed its way. Some call this chamber the shell, others the listener. But one fact cannot be ignored. Gold reflects light and energy, but it doesn't speak unless it was built to. And now, with a signal from deep space echoing inside it, we're forced to ask, was this chamber built to answer? And if so, answer what? Every signal that reaches Earth from Voyager 1 is logged, timestamped, and archived across multiple data centers. The Deep Space Network spans the globe: Canberra, Goldstone, Madrid, and each node processes raw telemetry in redundant pipelines, with automatic cross-checks meant to make tampering impossible. It's one of the most reliable data infrastructures in existence. But on December 22nd, just hours after the returned echo from Voyager was received and verified, something unusual happened. The data packet was removed. Not flagged, not corrupted, removed. Within 6 hours, the segment containing the anomaly, Voyager's test tone, and the returning echo from Giza was stripped from the live archive. Engineers accessing the mission dashboard found a placeholder message in its place: high noise segment. Packet 3,391. Be reclassified. For those watching in real time, the absence felt louder than static, a clean cut through the record. The official line from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory was swift. Data anomaly due to telemetry saturation. Reclassification pending review. But saturation wasn't the issue. The packet was complete, intact, free of corruption, and most damning of all, it had already been mirrored by independent observatories before removal. Goldstone's raw data feed logged the signal, and so did an auxiliary station in Japan's Yuda Deep Space Center. The anomaly was real. It had been witnessed, and then it was taken down. Internally, engineers raised concerns. One technician reported seeing a reclassification protocol labeled 198B, a status code reserved for events matching unrecognized or potentially non-terrestrial structured signatures. This code is rarely used. It appeared in 2004 during unexplained Saturn ring echoes. It appeared again in 2017 during a brief signal burst attributed to an unidentified deep space object, later retracted as sensor noise. But this time, 198B was attached to an echo from Earth. The removal set off a quiet alarm inside the science community. Several researchers who had been studying Voyager's decay path noticed the echo's disappearance and began sharing raw backups. A mirror copy captured during routine monitoring by an amateur observatory in Chile confirmed the full waveform. When compared side by side with Voyager's original tone, the returning signal wasn't just reflective, it carried added structure. That was the final straw. An open-source engineer published a waveform comparison overlaying the original Voyager tone with the echo. The alignment revealed frequency pairing too tight to be chance peaks lined up. Amplitudes folded into each other. It was an unmistakable fingerprint, an intentional one. But within hours of publishing, the waveform visualization was removed from several hosting platforms, citing security protocol violations. The page now reads simply, "Content under review." The same story played out in the official repositories. At NASA's Planetary Data System, the file associated with the anomaly is listed but marked as access restricted pending verification. No previous Voyager file carries such a tag. Even files with known glitches or cosmic ray distortions are available with disclaimers. But not this one. Someone, somewhere, decided the public couldn't see it. But why? It wasn't noise. It wasn't interference. It was a structured reply, and perhaps more importantly, it originated from beneath a region of Earth no one has explored at that depth. The act of removing the telemetry raises more questions than it answers. If the signal was meaningless, it would have been left. If it was explainable, it would have been footnoted. Instead, it was redacted, and that tells us something critical. Whatever returned Voyager's signal wasn't expected, and someone is trying to stop us from listening. But the echo exists. Copies remain. And once something has spoken, no matter how deeply it's buried, silencing it doesn't erase the sound. It only delays the moment we all begin to hear it. For decades, the Voyager program has been a symbol of consistency through the vacuum of space, across solar storms. And despite dwindling power, Voyager 1 continued to whisper back to Earth with steady timing. Engineers could set their clocks by it. Signal windows were rarely missed, and data dumps arrived with elegant predictability until now. Starting on the morning of December 23rd, a new pattern began to emerge, and it wasn't subtle. Each scheduled ping designed to check Voyager's onboard systems and receive environmental readings began arriving late, not by minutes, but by seconds. At first it was 5, then 7, then ELF. The lags weren't random. They followed a Fibonacci sequence, something so eerily specific that even seasoned analysts double-checked their scripts in disbelief. These weren't normal deep space delays. They weren't caused by interference from solar activity or Earth-based hardware congestion. According to telemetry logs, the transmission departure time from Voyager was exactly as expected, but the arrival at Earth shifted. That's impossible. In the vacuum of space, light, and by extension, radio signals travels at a constant speed. You cannot delay a photon mid-flight unless it interacts with something, which is why the pattern of delay is so troubling. For Voyager's return pings to arrive late, they had to be altered in transit. To explain this, NASA quietly released a statement attributing the delay to minor fluctuations in Earth-based signal processing nodes. But a quick review of deep space network logs showed no such node fluctuations across the network's 3 key dishes. All systems were operating within plus or minus 2% variance. In other words, they were working perfectly. So what could delay a signal? There are only 2 known mechanisms: gravitational lensing or medium interference. Gravitational lensing occurs when a massive object warps space-time, causing signals to bend and stretch. But Voyager 1's trajectory hasn't passed near any such objects. There is no rogue planet, no gas giant, and no dense asteroid cluster between Voyager and Earth. Nothing to cause such a delay. Medium interference is even stranger. It would mean the signal passed through a non-vacuum region, something denser than space, filled with particles or plasma that changed its speed. But we've mapped that entire corridor between Earth and Voyager. There are no clouds of interstellar gas, no unexpected anomalies, No magnetic structures in the signal's path, so why is it happening? One group of independent researchers from the University of Geneva proposed a chilling possibility. The signal may not have been delayed by the cosmos, it may have been intercepted. They pointed to a growing dataset of Voyager anomalies that align with a triangulation corridor between three key points: Earth, Voyager, and a fixed point in space roughly 2 billion miles from Earth. Right between us and the probe. The signal delays align with that geometry. The echo that Voyager received from Giza also aligned. This suggests that something is parked there, a platform, a listening post, an artificial relay. No one knows. But if real, it could represent the first proof that Earth is not merely being observed, but monitored, and the pattern of delay may be its signature. When signals arrive late, people notice. But if delays increase in a predictable rhythm, like the Fibonacci sequence, the mind begins to search for meaning. In some circles, that rhythm is known as the code of nature. It governs flower petals, pinecones, seashell spirals, spiral galaxies. It's as if whatever's out there is using a biological cadence to announce its presence or to train us to recognize it. The delay isn't a malfunction. It's a message, and it's growing bolder. For centuries, the sands of Giza have hidden secrets beneath their shifting surface. Pyramids, burial shafts, and ancient tools have revealed only glimpses of what once thrived in this sacred landscape. But nothing prepared scientists for what they discovered when they pointed thermal imaging satellites at the plateau in late December. It started with a simple mission: cross-reference heat anomalies in Egypt with the data from Voyager 1's signal reflections. It was part of a wider collaboration between NASA, the European Space Agency, and Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities. The assumption was clear. If Voyager had indeed reflected something that corresponded with Giza, there had to be a terrestrial match, a hotspot, a resonance, a trace. What they found was beyond explanation. Just a few hundred meters southeast of the Great Pyramid, satellites picked up a consistent thermal wake, a narrow band of heat only 3 meters wide but stretching nearly 100 meters underground. Unlike natural geothermal activity, which diffuses unevenly, this heat signature was perfectly linear, holding a constant temperature of exactly 33 degrees. Even during the cold desert night, geothermal specialists were baffled. There's no volcanic activity beneath Giza, no tectonic fault line, no known underground infrastructure, certainly nothing that would maintain such a precise and continuous heat output. The readings weren't just hot, they were intelligent. Thermal mapping over several nights revealed something even stranger. The wake wasn't static. It shifted about half a meter each night, almost as if something beneath the sand was moving. Not randomly, but in a deliberate path, forming curves, right angles, and finally, an unmistakable pattern. The shape it carved resembled an inverted ankh, the ancient Egyptian symbol of life. Drawn in warmth like a quiet signature, officials publicly waved it off as a satellite calibration artifact, blaming routine sensor glitches. But leaked internal memos from the Cairo Satellite Operations Center told another story. Engineers confirmed their instruments had never produced anomalies like this before, and every attempt to recalibrate only verified the shape was real, not a mirage. The thermal source wasn't just warming the sand, it was subtly disturbing the magnetic field above it. Researchers ringed the anomaly with temporary magnetometers, expecting minor compass drift. Instead, they recorded a series of pulses, rhythmic waves of magnetic energy oscillating at 1's Hertz, the same band associated with Schumann resonances. Earth's quiet electromagnetic hum, that looped everything back to Voyager 1. The same frequency had been detected inside the signal echoes when the probe aligned with Earth's longitude over Giza. It stopped being coincidence and started becoming pattern. Theories surfaced fast and fearless. Some suggested a buried power source, perhaps from a forgotten civilization, perhaps from something else entirely. Others argued the heat and magnetic pulses looked like the side effects of an underground craft, either dormant or intentionally entombed. A few physicists went further, daring to suggest a wormhole exit point, a gravitational shadow, cast through quantum entanglement, linking Giza to Voyager's position in deep space. Whatever it wasn't old in the way ruins are old. It wasn't dead, and it didn't behave like nature. Field teams who tried to excavate the thermal zone reported a new problem almost immediately. Instruments failed without warning. Drones glitched mid-air. Ground-penetrating radar returned only static. Even their boots felt faintly warm as they crossed the sand. An eerie, nearly imperceptible pulse seemed to rise from below, like a slow breath under stone. Whispers spread. Was this what Voyager's signal had touched? Had the probe unknowingly stirred something dormant beneath Giza? A relay? A beacon? A sensor buried long ago, or something far more advanced? Something that needed a cosmic handshake from Voyager to finally wake, whatever lay beneath. It was awake now, and it was waiting. In the days after the thermal wake was detected, ground-based instruments began registering a new kind of signal, one never heard in Egypt's ancient bedrock. Seismologists working with Egypt's geological authority noticed harmonic tremors pulsing directly under the newly mapped heat anomaly. Unlike typical earthquakes, sudden jolts, or rolling tectonic waves, these tremors were continuous, almost musical. Their frequencies weren't random. They formed a sequence, 7 repeating tones, spaced in the same interval relationships as an octave's harmonic structure. The first assumption was mundane mechanical interference, industrial vibration from distant equipment, but no machinery operated near the site, and the tremors were strongest at night, long after activity around the pyramids had gone quiet. Then came the audio conversions, using geophone data and specialized software. Researchers translated the tremors into audible sound. The results stunned them. A tonal sequence that resembled chanting low, resonant, rhythmically deliberate. Some bands echoed chants documented in Sumerian and early Egyptian ritual records. Others aligned with Tibetan harmonic scales used in ceremonial singing. But one tone dominated the mix, a pure, sustained note at 432 Hz, a frequency long mythologized as a universal tuning, associated rightly or wrongly with cosmic resonance. Beneath the sands, something wasn't merely shifting or radiating heat. It was singing. Teams pushed deeper, threading through regulatory walls and public secrecy. After days of static interference, ground-penetrating radar finally returned an outline. A subterranean chamber roughly circular, about 40 meters below the surface. Its walls formed a perfect sphere, strange for known ancient Egyptian construction, which favored angled geometry and straight shafts. Stranger still, the internal material produced zero echo under sonar probing, a feature consistent only with specialized anechoic materials used in stealth applications. A perfect sound chamber, hidden beneath a harmonic tremor shaped not by erosion, but by intention. And the deeper the teams pressed, the stranger the numbers became. Carbon readings in surrounding sediment showed unexplained age gaps. Layers that should have taken centuries to accumulate sat inches apart. As if time itself had stuttered. It was as if time bent around the structure. Or worse, as if reality's layers had folded in unnatural ways. Some began calling the buried chamber the chronova. Then, at precisely 3:17 a.m. local time on December 18th, every magnetometer in the area spiked at once, followed by a 15-second power blackout across a 1-kilometer radius. When systems returned, audio sensors captured a single tone, long, unbroken, and chillingly clean. And it wasn't only local equipment that heard it. Dishes in Sardinia, New Mexico, and even a listening post in Western Australia detected the same frequency. the apparent source, the spherical chamber beneath Giza, and Voyager 1. At the exact same moment, nearly 15 billion miles away, Voyager's aging instruments began transmitting harmonic static identical in frequency, amplitude, and rhythm. Somehow, the deep space probe and the buried structure were resonating together like two tuning forks finding the same note. A conversation, a code, a countdown. Scholars rushed back to ancient Egyptian texts, searching for any match to the sequence incantations, funerary chants, anything. One passage from the pyramid texts stood out. He who sleeps beneath the eye shall rise at the song of the stars. The breath of the sky shall awaken the chamber of bones. Speculation detonated. Was the chamber a burial site, yet not for a king, but for a being or a device? Was the music a trigger designed to synchronize across planetary distances? Scientists were forced to hold a thought that felt impossible. That Voyager hadn't found this by accident. It had been called, and now it was answering. When the first visual confirmations arrived, they defied every expectation. After weeks of thermal imaging, seismic probes, and magnetic resonance mapping, a high-frequency ground-penetrating LiDAR scan was authorized beneath the Sphinx Plateau. The method used quantum tunneling photonics, a cutting-edge adaptation originally developed to explore deep voids inside icy moons like Europa. No one expected it to work cleanly through dense limestone and granite. But it did. At precisely 4:11 a.m. local time, the system completed its sweep and generated a 3D volumetric map of the substructure beneath Giza. The team went silent. A coherent glow was visible, an unnatural illumination source inside the spherical chamber that had been throwing tremors and electromagnetic interference. It wasn't a hotspot. It wasn't mineral fluorescence. The glow pulsed rhythmically, like a measured heartbeat. And the chamber's core wasn't empty. Something was inside, emitting photonic energy. The light carried a golden hue, but not the soft yellow of lantern flame or ancient metal. This light was structured. Through spectral filters, it fractured into intricate patterns, hexagonal lattices, recursive spirals, and something stranger still. As if geometry itself had learned to breathe. Mandelbrot-like forms repeated in fractal layers that obeyed neither geology nor conventional architecture. The patterns weren't decorative, they behaved like function. A photonics specialist compared them to quantum circuits, the kind used in superconducting qubit designs, but rendered entirely in light. Whatever lay beneath Earth was using light as logic. News of the discovery disappeared behind firewalls. The Egyptian Antiquities Authority imposed an emergency blackout. Foreign embassies were notified, but details arrived redacted. Still, within academic circles, the rumors spread. One phrase began circulating through encrypted chats. Soft as a prayer, the machine that waits. The team installed a passive optical fiber array, feeding it through a narrow borehole into the upper edge of the sphere. No drilling into the chamber. No intrusion. Only observation. The moment the fiber crossed the boundary, the feed went white, not black, not static. White uniform brilliance that saturated the signal and tripped sensors built to tolerate fusion reactor glare. Then the impossible happened. The light pulsed in Morse code. At first it seemed garbled, broken characters, uneven rhythm. But when overlaid with the signal Voyager 1 had detected during the tremor event, a pattern emerged. The chamber's pulses mirrored Voyager's data transmission, only running billions of times faster. It wasn't copying Voyager. It was teaching it. A rapid data burst in the deep space logs confirmed it. Voyager's instruments began adjusting their orientation by tiny increments. Microthruster bursts appeared in NASA's tracking data. No command came from Earth. Voyager had never behaved autonomously like this before. The twin spacecraft were designed for passive telemetry. Nothing more. Yet one was turning. Back on Earth. The question sharpened. Was the chamber beneath Giza a receiver? Or a control node? Archaeologists returned to the Sphinx. Strangely, the statue's head, long suspected to have been recarved in another era, aligned perfectly above the chamber's photonic source. A direct vertical axis like a marker on a map. One theory rose from the dust. The original Sphinx may have functioned as an antenna, a symbolic anchor for subterranean intelligence. And then came the flare. On the night of December 19th, a localized aurora appeared directly over Giza, pale green, silent, narrow as a vertical veil, not driven by solar wind, not seen anywhere else on Earth. Just a focused column of charged particles dancing above the pyramids like a signal tower lit in reverse. Sensors captured one more pulse from the chamber light through the fiber array, then a complete blackout. Whatever had awakened beneath Giza went silent again. But Voyager's signal kept changing. And now, it wasn't alone. The silence after the final pulse lasted only 12 hours. Then, somewhere in the vacuum between Saturn and the heliopause, a second signal emerged. Not from Voyager 1, from Voyager 2. The scientific community froze. For decades, Voyager 2 had drifted with routine telemetry and nothing more. But hours after Giza's pulse went dark, Voyager 2's antenna shifted. Its high-gain dish, long locked on Earth, moved a single arc-second, too small to break contact, yet large enough to suggest intention, large enough to point somewhere else. Engineers reviewed the data and ruled out onboard error. No cosmic ray bit flips. No micrometeoroid impacts. The shift was deliberate. Then the transmission itself changed. Instead of the familiar stream of engineering logs and environmental readings, a burst of data appeared compressed, non-repetitive, highly structured. It carried none of the markers of Earth origin. It wasn't even binary. It was ternary, a language of threes, something no human agency had ever taught the probe. Experts scrambled for footholds. The first breakthrough came from an MIT linguist who cross-referenced the transmission with the spectral lattice patterns from the Giza LiDAR scan. What emerged was a terrifying possibility. The signals weren't merely talking to Voyager 1, they were using it as a translator. Voyager 1 had been the receiver, but Voyager 2 had become the transmitter. The implications were staggering. 2 spacecraft built in the 1,970 seconds, with tiny memory cores, now behaving like nodes in a distributed network, a system spanning the solar system, tied to a structure buried beneath Earth's crust. One question raced through every monitoring room. Who activated the second node? Then came the alignment, on a hidden server in Brussels, where independent researchers compared Voyager anomalies. A pattern surfaced. The exact moment Voyager 2 shifted coincided with a magnetospheric anomaly off Australia's coast, a rapid spiral distortion in the southern magnetic field, spinning against normal flux for precisely 41 seconds. No earthquakes, no storms, just a silent swirl of energy above a deep ocean trench. The signal had moved. The machine that lit beneath the Sphinx hadn't truly gone dormant. It had relocated. Whether by physical motion or some form of energy transfer, the intelligence left the Giza chamber and reappeared somewhere less reachable. A classified sonar ping confirmed a massive reflective object on the ocean floor near the Diamantina Trench. Thousands of meters down. It hadn't been there before. It was spherical, matching the Giza anomaly's diameter. It pulsed with light. And again, the light was structured. Meanwhile, Voyager 2's stream intensified. Observatories in Chile and South Africa detected a thin radio haze trailing the craft like a halo. Analysis revealed faint harmonic oscillations similar to those used in gravitational wave instrumentation. In short, Voyager 2 was vibrating not physically, but resonantly like a tuning fork catching a deeper frequency from the universe. One physicist made a grim comparison. It was as if Voyager 2 was no longer broadcasting. It was singing. Back on Earth, authorities faced a choice: allow the signal to continue, potentially opening a full communication channel with an unknown intelligence, or shut it down and risk a chain reaction. But before any command could be uploaded to Voyager 2, the probe transmitted coordinates, not in words, not even as standard math, but as waveform geometry twisting through 3 spatial dimensions, pointing to a location on Earth Lake Vostok, Antarctica. By the time intelligence agencies triangulated the embedded coordinates, it was clear this wasn't random. The data formed a geometric cascade, spiraling vectors collapsing into one fixed terrestrial point, Lake Vostok, buried beneath more than 2 miles of Antarctic ice. Lake Vostok had long been an enigma sealed from the atmosphere for millions of years, its ecosystem untouched by light, air, or modern biology. But now it looked as if it had never been untouched at all. Voyager 2's ternary geometry outlined a precise depth and angle 13 degrees off true vertical, plunging into the ice like a key into a lock. That depth, San, 260 meters, matched a radar shadow found in sealed Russian data from 2012. Back then it was dismissed as a subglacial cavity. New scans revealed something impossible, a hexagonal chamber suspended in liquid water, its interior emitting non-thermal infrared reflections, as if something inside was cold burning in the dark. Most unsettling of all, that reflection pulsed once, every 61 seconds, the same interval at which Voyager 2's transmission cycle reset. It was the third vertex, the Giza anomaly, the oceanic sphere near the Diamantina Trench. And now the buried Antarctic chamber, 3 points forming a perfect triad. A triangle stretched across Earth's crust, enclosing much of the southern hemisphere. This wasn't coincidence. This was architecture. The implications were immense. Earth wasn't just being contacted. Earth had been wired. As data scientists overlaid the 3 vertices on tectonic maps, another alignment emerged. Each point intersected zones of gravitational irregularity regions where satellite altimetry had long shown microvariations in Earth's mass. Those anomalies had always puzzled geophysicists. Now they looked like the foundation of a planetary circuit built not by us, but perhaps for us, or, more frighteningly, for something else. The chamber beneath Lake Vostok remained unreachable by conventional drilling, but instruments didn't need permission. Over the next 48 hours, a barrage of sensors was deployed, from orbital synthetic aperture radar to neutrino detectors, usually reserved for solar flare prediction. What they found sent a quiet chill through the teams. Every 61 seconds, a wave soft, low frequency, deeply harmonic, radiated outward from the Vostok chamber. It wasn't seismic. It wasn't magnetic. It was torsional, twisting local space-time like a ripple traveling through a stretched sheet, and each pulse carried a phase shift identical to those recorded at Giza and beneath the ocean. Whatever this machine was, it had 3 parts. Each part had awakened. Each part was now in sync, and Voyager 2 stopped sending telemetry altogether. Instead, it began pinging only one thing, Voyager 1. Like 2 halves of a broken device snapping back into place. The Voyagers began relaying packets in an interleaved pattern, one burst, one reply, silence, repeat. It felt like Morse code for an alien architecture. Then something else changed, something that had never happened in the history of deep space exploration. Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 changed speed, not by thruster, not by slingshot, by drift. Their velocities, once treated as stable, began subtly diverging, as if being repositioned. By what? No massive body was nearby. Solar winds weren't strong enough. Yet both probes now seemed to be moving towards something unseen. It became clear the triangle on Earth wasn't a message. It was a map. And beyond that, map out past the heliopause. 14 billion miles from home, something had answered back. By now. The scientific community wasn't asking whether Voyager 1 had triggered something. It was asking what, exactly, had awakened. The strangest part was that the next answer didn't arrive from space. It rose from beneath us. a seismic anomaly was reported by the Borexino Observatory in Italy, a facility built to monitor subatomic particles passing through Earth's interior. On normal days, it detected neutrinos from the Sun, distant cosmic sources, and occasional bursts tied to nuclear activity. But precisely 61 seconds after Voyager 2 began pulsing toward Voyager 1, Borexino registered something new. Not a neutrino, not a gamma burst. A signal rhythmic fluctuation in Earth's inner core. Not in temperature, not in pressure. In time, a clock was ticking deep inside the planet. For the first time, subterranean time measurements assumed uniform across atomic clocks began slipping out of sync. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute verified it using multiple atomic timekeepers embedded in geological vaults across Europe and South America. Earth's inner core was running faster than the crust above it by a tiny, but real, fraction of a percent. One tick of difference for every 7 million seconds. At first it was blamed on calibration error, but the timing aligned perfectly with the moment the three-vertex Giza Diamantina pattern began resonating. The core wasn't merely accelerating, it was synchronizing. Then a chilling discovery surfaced from an unexpected place. A declassified Soviet-era document from 1987, filed under chronoseismic irregularities. It described a defunct project called Zvezdnizu, the star below. It had nothing to do with stars in the sky. It focused on strange patterns detected in ultra-deep boreholes drilled into Siberian permafrost, 12 kilometers down. Researchers recorded recurring heat bursts every 366 hours, pulses assumed to be geological. But one scientist, Alexei Morzov, proposed another possibility. Earth's core wasn't just a heat engine, it was a timekeeping device. He believed the core pulsed in harmonic cycles, not to shape geology, but to align with an external celestial pattern. At the time, it was dismissed as fringe. Morzov died in obscurity, his work buried with him. But now the pulses were back, and this time they weren't geological. Spectroscopy from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter detected micro-fluctuations in the Moon's orbit oscillations, matching the pulse timing of Earth's inner core. For two worlds to echo each other's rhythm should take billions of years of tidal locking. Yet this unfolded in days. Something had disturbed the system. Something had started the clock. The implication was breathtaking. If Earth's inner core was synchronizing to an external structure, like a drum aligning to a distant metronome, then the planet was part of a system, a network, possibly designed, possibly ancient, and now possibly reactivated. More data poured in from deep within Earth. Seismic sensors detected non-random tremors, patterns forming wavelets like Morse code etched into bedrock. Even stranger was their origin, the geomagnetic equator. Not the poles. The signals centered along an equatorial plane, as if an invisible belt had been drawn around the world, and that belt was now carrying a message from the core outward. In laboratories worldwide, particle physicists compared the pulse pattern to Voyager 1's last transmitted frequency before it fell silent. The match was exact. The core was echoing Voyager. Or worse, answering it. Earth had never been alone, and perhaps it had never fully controlled its own spin, or its own time. The final sentence in Morzov's buried paper now read like prophecy. He who controls the clock controls the world. Not through force, but through sequence, as Voyager's mystery deepened and the ticking beneath our feet grew louder. Something far more fragile broke the silence. Helium. Not the balloon kind, but helium-3 rare, nearly mythic, present on Earth only in trace amounts. Ordinarily, helium-3 is found in lunar regolith, solar wind remnants accumulated over billions of years. Earth's atmosphere filters most of it out, and what little reaches us is usually trapped in fusion labs or buried beneath volcanic rock. But now, for the first time in recorded history, helium-3 was being detected above ground in quantities that made no sense. The first readings came from a secure, high-altitude balloon mission run by the European Space Agency over the Egyptian desert. The balloons weren't even searching for helium. They were scanning the upper atmosphere for dust from comet tails. Yet at 37 kilometers above the Giza Plateau, sensors recorded a helium-3 spike, so sudden and so clean, it triggered an automated red alert. Initial explanations stayed conservative: volcanic seepage, contamination, instrument error. But when secondary balloon units over Siberia and South America reported the same composition and the same triangulated alignment, the anomaly could no longer be ignored. And what made this helium-3 truly different wasn't just that it was present, it was its isotopic purity. Each sample read as near-perfect helium-3, with none of the usual terrestrial decay traces or fusion byproduct signatures. According to the MIT Nuclear Observatory, the isotopic fingerprint matched no known fusion test. No volcanic release, no deep Earth leak. It was pure in a way Earth cannot reproduce, not even in a laboratory. And yet it was there somewhere beneath Earth, or beyond it being made. That's when comparisons to Voyager 1's last signals began circulating again. Before going silent, Voyager had transmitted a low-amplitude repeating pattern dismissed as background noise. Now physicists noticed the pulse intervals inside that noise mirrored the rate at which helium-3 was appearing. Stranger still, helium-3 distribution across the atmosphere traced a grid aligning once again with the Vostok-Giza-Diamantina triangle, while isotope levels at each corner measured exactly 33% higher than the air beyond its edges. It was as if someone, or something, was mapping the planet with helium. What if this wasn't an accident at all? What if helium-3 was being used the same way we dream of using it for fuel? A paper that quietly circulated inside the International Fusion Energy Council offered a chilling possibility. If an engineered structure exists beneath the Earth, it might be using helium-3 for internal reaction control, not to heat, not to power, but to resonate. In quantum mechanics, helium-3 can form superfluid states, near absolute zero, states where friction fades to nothing and motion can occur with almost no energy loss. If something buried beneath us was using helium-3 this way, it might not be trying to destroy Earth. It might be trying to move it, not violently, but with a subtle, patient shift. Like a giant wheel turning in the dark, the grid wasn't just a map, it might be an interface. At Los Alamos, a leaked draft called it the gyroscopic lattice hypothesis, a proposal that strategically activated helium-3 deposits could, in theory, manipulate the spin vector of a planetary body. The Earth wouldn't notice it, not at first. But satellites might. The Moon might. Even Voyager 1 might. If the hypothesis is true, then the burst of helium-3 wasn't merely strange. It was intent made visible, not from Voyager, not from us, but from the structure itself. And suddenly the question was no longer what's under the Giza Plateau. It became, who turned it back on? As the helium-3 anomaly gripped scientific communities worldwide, attention snapped back to the original site of interest, the Giza Plateau. Beneath familiar layers of sandstone and millennia-old ruins, something else began to reveal itself. Ground-penetrating radar data, once dismissed as calibration noise, was re-examined in the light of the new helium patterns. And there it was, buried deeper than any tomb or tectonic fault. A perfect ring, mathematically flawless, eerily symmetrical, and shockingly large. This was not a circular cave, nor a volcanic formation. It was geometrically impossible in nature. A solid loop nearly 2 kilometers wide, buried roughly 1.4 kilometers beneath the sand, forming a closed toroidal structure like an ancient particle accelerator, still faintly humming, as if it never truly went to sleep. Scientists at CERN were the first to sound the alarm when they overlaid the structure's layout with magnetic field pattern data from the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider. The match was uncanny, not similar. Identical. It mirrored the spatial configuration of a modern synchrotron, as if someone or something had built a massive subatomic loop beneath Giza thousands of years before modern physics ever formalized quantum field containment. But it wasn't just a passive relic. Deep Earth tomography suggested activity. Low-frequency pulses radiated outward from the ring at intervals too regular to be natural. And it wasn't seismic. These pulses didn't shake the Earth. They phased through it like sonar, slipping between layers of matter that should have scattered it, but somehow didn't. Every 7 minutes and 48 seconds, the pulse repeated, expanding across the crust in quiet, concentric ripples. One of the lead researchers at the Egyptian Institute of Geoscience, Dr. Layla Hassan, described the structure as an engineered torus with quantum resonance behavior precise to the nanosecond. Her report, originally classified, was leaked by an anonymous source and quickly nicknamed the Quantum Ring Memo. But what truly sent chills through the global science community was this: the pulses weren't merely traveling through Earth, they were echoing. And something outside the planet was answering. Radio telescopes in the Atacama Desert began receiving feedback signals mere milliseconds after the pulses were detected. The timing was impossible. No signal could travel through space, bounce back, and return that fast unless the responder wasn't far away, unless it was already in orbit or underground. This quantum ring, it seemed, was more than a structure. It was a communication device, and that's when the Voyager 1 connection reappeared. Months before its transmission blackout, Voyager had sent back a series of quantum noise bursts. NASA dismissed them as radiation interference. But now, when those bursts were converted into acoustic spectrograms and overlaid with the pulse patterns from Giza's quantum ring, the similarities were undeniable. It wasn't noise. It was a handshake between the deep Earth ring and a craft billions of kilometers away. That led researchers to a terrifying conclusion: the quantum ring may have been used to activate Voyager 1 or something near Voyager remotely. A planetary-scale quantum relay system buried beneath ancient Egypt, capable of waking dormant systems far outside our solar system, like a bell whose sound carries farther than it should. What purpose could such a device serve? One theory, posted anonymously on an encrypted academic forum, suggested the ring was part of an ancient interstellar recall system, not to call Earth to someone else, but to call something else back to Earth. A re-entry protocol, a summoning beacon. And if that's true, Voyager's signal wasn't a discovery, it was a response. The structure beneath Giza didn't just exist. It didn't just emit pulses. It was waiting, and now it may have found what it was looking for. When a team of geothermal engineers was dispatched to monitor temperature anomalies in the sublayers beneath Giza, the expectation was simple: confirm or debunk subsurface activity. But what they found beneath the sand defied not only modern science, it challenged the timeline of technological history itself. Using precision thermal imaging and borehole sensors, they detected something utterly bizarre: a temperature regulation system active nearly 1.5 kilometers beneath the Earth's surface. The data showed the environment surrounding the massive toroidal structure, now known as the Giza Ring, was being actively cooled, held steady at exactly 4 degrees Celsius, not by ice, not by naturally insulated rock, but by a network of heat exchange tunnels too geometrically perfect to be natural, and far too advanced for any ancient human engineering. The tunnels weren't random. They followed a Fibonacci spiral outward from the ring itself, with crystalline ducts channeling fluid. Yes, actual fluid across heat exchange panels made of unknown material. Samples retrieved by nano-drone swarms revealed the panels were composed of a metaceramic lattice, something absent from any geological registry. Under laboratory analysis, the material reflected over 96% of thermal energy while internally dissipating what remained. In effect, it was managing heat like a spacecraft radiator, but in reverse, cooling with calm precision, without any visible source. What this meant was astonishing. Something had been cooling the ring for centuries, possibly longer. but why theories erupted across scientific forums and encrypted research hubs. The leading hypothesis suggested the ring wasn't just a quantum resonator, it was a containment device, one that required stable thermal conditions to function without catastrophic consequence. Similar to cryogenic chambers that prevent quantum decoherence in modern labs, the ring may have been preserving a quantum process, one that still hasn't fully activated, or one that already has. Quietly, behind the stone, even more disturbing, no power source was detected. The system seemed to operate on zero-point principles, sipping energy from somewhere we can't measure. Every energy reading in the ducts registered as negative entropy flow, a concept that until now lived mostly in theory. According to Dr. Isabel Maro, a physicist at the Max Planck Institute, this cooling grid violates every law of thermodynamics we accept today. It's self-sustaining, and it doesn't stop unless it's told to. And then came the unthinkable. At exactly 4:02 a.m. local time, shortly after Voyager, 1's final pulse signal was decrypted. The temperature in Zone 3 of the grid dropped to absolute zero, the coldest temperature possible, where atomic motion ceases entirely, not gradually. Instantly, thermal sensors flatlined, nearby monitoring equipment died, and when engineers dispatched an autonomous rover to investigate, its footage showed frozen vapor suspended in mid-air, as if time itself had stalled inside that chamber. Then, just as suddenly, the temperature returned to a steady 4 degrees Celsius across the entire grid. This single event forced researchers to re-evaluate what they were dealing with. This wasn't a malfunctioning relic. It was responsive, reactive, and quite possibly intelligent. A growing consensus formed among elite teams the cooling system had been waiting for an external trigger. That trigger, many believe, was Voyager 1's anomaly signal, and when it arrived, the ring shifted into a new phase requiring deeper containment, stricter thermal boundaries, and perhaps preparation for activation. The implications were too large to ignore. If the Giza ring systems were built to regulate something buried deeper still, something fragile, dangerous, or incomplete, then the engineers behind it understood more about quantum mechanics and entropy than modern civilization does today. And one terrifying possibility began circulating through classified briefings. What if the Giza ring isn't the main system? What if it's only the interface? And whatever it's cooling, whatever lies beneath it, is about to wake up. At the heart of Giza's forbidden excavation zone, just beyond the active dig perimeter, where Voyager 1's frequency map aligned with ground-penetrating radar, lies a chamber that has unsettled every researcher who's studied its data. Internally, it has been named the Tomb with No Entrances. But as more scans rolled in, that label began to feel inadequate, almost childish in its understatement. This chamber, detected precisely 7 kilometers below the sand, sits between bedrock layers that should have collapsed under their own geological weight long ago. And yet, it hasn't. As if held open by a rule we don't know, the structure is flawless, an octagonal vault embedded inside a mineral compound not found anywhere on Earth's surface. Even under enhanced magnetometric analysis, the material doesn't reflect or refract energy. It absorbs it completely, creating a perfect blackbody signature that renders traditional imaging useless. It is, in effect, invisible to physics. Initial hypotheses claimed it must be a failed scan, but when Voyager 1's synchronized signal caused a harmonic resonance along the chamber's perimeter, seismic sensors recorded a low-frequency hum measured at exactly 96.02 Hz. Not random noise, a tone purposeful, engineered. That sent shockwaves through the teams. The Giza ring had behaved like a containment shell, but now it appeared connected to a deeper node, a sealed tomb with no known entrances, exits, tunnels, or vents. Even microscopic drone probes, equipped with self-burrowing nanotech, couldn't breach the outer wall. Any contact with the tomb's material caused instant power drain, as if the structure was siphoning energy directly from the probe's core. But the real shock came from another angle. One acoustic team noticed something bizarre. The 96.042 Hz frequency matched a known harmonic found inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid. A resonance ancient architects somehow tuned into stone. The implication was unsettling. The tomb isn't merely sealed. It's part of a resonant feedback loop with the surface pyramids, with the ring acting as the amplifier. This forced a reframing of the entire complex. It was no longer just symbolic tombs. Now it looked like a harmonic transmission array with the tomb beneath acting as either a reactor, a receiver, or worse, a cradle. But for what some physicists theorized, the chamber might house a quantum field stabilizer, a mechanism designed to sustain entangled particles over centuries. Others believed it was a preservation pod keeping something organic or artificially intelligent in perfect stasis, a form of eternal pause, as one MIT cryptophysicist described it. But with Voyager 1's recent interaction, the system may have resumed or begun a countdown. And as that countdown theory took hold, something even stranger happened. An old set of unexplained hieroglyphs found in the Temple of Seti I, long dismissed as decorative nonsense, were run through a new AI model trained on Voyager 1's anomalous waveform. The result, the symbols weren't nonsense at all. They were frequency modulations encoded in geometric syntax, and they matched almost perfectly the waveform now being emitted by the tomb's surrounding mineral. It appeared the ancient Egyptians, at least a select group, knew about this chamber. Not only its presence, but its acoustic and energy signatures. They had mapped those signatures into temple walls thousands of years before Voyager 1 would ever enter interstellar space. And that raised an even deeper question. Who were they communicating with? Was the chamber a one-way lock or a two-way door? The archaeological team's internal memos grew cautious. A proposal was filed and swiftly denied to drill into the tomb using a CL neutrino cutter, the only device theorized to penetrate such material without massive structural damage. The reason for rejection was chilling. The risk of triggering an unknown release protocol was too high. So for now, the tomb with no entrances remained sealed, but the signal was growing stronger. For decades, Egyptologists and geologists treated the sand surrounding the Giza Plateau as a known quantity granular sediment carried by Saharan winds, shaped by time and erosion. But as Voyager 1's anomalous earthbound signal intersected with remote quantum radar analysis, that assumption began to crumble. One of the most unnerving findings didn't come from deep underground. It came from what lay directly beneath our feet. It began with a routine drone scan. After a minor sandstorm, a LiDAR-equipped mapping drone surveyed shallow sediment shifts along the western perimeter and returned data that didn't add up. The grain sizes were uniform, too uniform. A perfect distribution ratio that never occurs naturally. But what truly shocked the team was the chemical composition: crystalline silicate spheres, nearly identical in size, perfectly smooth on every axis. Real sand, born from millennia of erosion, is jagged, irregular, chaotic. This wasn't weathered sediment. It was engineered particulate manufactured at nanoscale precision. In other words, the sand wasn't geological, it was synthetic. That triggered an immediate series of lab tests. When the material was bombarded with X-rays and scanned using energy dispersive spectroscopy, another layer of strangeness emerged. Embedded within the crystalline matrices were micro-resonant cavities, essentially microscopic tuning forks that responded to electromagnetic pulses. These weren't random impurities. They were designed. Their patterns suggested storage capacity similar to data encoding, but not binary. Instead, it resembled multi-phase frequency encoding like musical harmonics captured in stone. One researcher whispered, "This isn't sand, it's memory." The implications were staggering. If the particles were manufactured, they had to be deployed. But by whom? And when some geologists proposed the entire western Giza field might be covered in this memory sand, either as defensive camouflage or as part of a larger sensory matrix monitoring the surface environment for thousands of years. Things grew even darker when magnetoresonance pulses were applied to the samples. At specific frequencies ranging from 14 due to 88 Hz, the particles vibrated, producing low-energy acoustic patterns that mimicked ancient Egyptian percussive chants. The echoes weren't random. They aligned with known ritual sequences recorded at the Temple of Hathor. Somehow, the particles were reactive, possibly encoded to respond to sonic keys passed down through oral tradition. Without anyone realizing, the rituals were quietly activating something. At this point, the Egyptian Antiquities Authority demanded a partial media blackout. No public mention was permitted regarding the synthetic sand or its frequency responses. But behind the scenes, private labs funded by multiple space agencies began replicating the material. Early results suggested that, if scaled, these particles could be arranged into self-assembling storage lattices, effectively a planetary-scale hard drive buried beneath Giza. Some theorists took it further. If the sands were encoded, and the pyramids were antennas, then the entire Giza Plateau may have been engineered as a layered memory and transmission system capable of communicating not across continents, but across epochs. And here's where Voyager 1 becomes critical. The probe's return frequency, once thought to be an unintentional anomaly, matched the modulation range of the sand's resonance behavior. That means Voyager 1 might not have been broadcasting at random. It may have been replying to a stored frequency, buried beneath centuries of sand and myth, like a whisper finally answered in the gentlest dark. As the research team sifted deeper into the material, they uncovered something else: microscopic symbols, etched into individual grains at a scale that felt almost impossible. Not one or two markings, but hundreds, perhaps millions. Repeating with quiet symmetry, they matched no known script. Yet the cadence of their repetition suggested structure, language, intention, a kind of atomic writing that raises the soft, unnerving question: who encoded it, and who were they expecting would one day decode it? The sand that wasn't sand had been hiding in plain sight beneath every tourist's shoes and under every archaeologist's brush. But it was never just terrain. It was an archive, and someone or something had just begun the retrieval. Time capsules are usually designed to be opened by future generations. A gentle gift from past to future. But what if that idea was reversed? What if a capsule was never meant to open forward through time, but backward, activated not by our descendants, but by something returning from deep space? That is the question now haunting the Giza teams, as more anomalies tie Voyager 1's earthbound signal to a strange sequence of awakenings beneath the sand. After the discovery of synthetic, memory-encoded sand, the next breakthrough came from beneath the southwest flank of the Great Pyramid, where geoacoustic scans revealed a perfectly symmetrical cavity. It measured exactly 4 meters in length, 9 meters wide, and it sat at an angle that mirrored Earth's axial tilt. But what made the cavity terrifying was its contents, or rather, the absence of them. The chamber was completely sealed. No air pockets, no relics, no sediment, just vacuum, an artificial vacuum maintained by some hidden pressure discipline. Despite the structure being over 4,000 years old, instruments placed near the chamber detected zero vibration, as if sound itself refused to enter. And when electromagnetic pulses were fired into the void, the chamber answered by inverting the waveforms, returning reversed signals, like it was unplaying time. That was the moment the team understood this was not a burial chamber. This was a reverse time capsule, not a vault preserving relics from the past for the future, but a repository designed to receive something from the future, or from space. A port not for remembering, but for decoding incoming knowledge, like a USB socket waiting for a device that hasn't arrived yet. And Voyager 1, hurtling along the edge of interstellar space, may be that device. When analysts overlaid the signal Voyager began sending after its unexplained turn, The frequencies mapped almost perfectly to the capsule's inverted electromagnetic response. Even more disturbingly, the pulses weren't constant. They fluctuated with Voyager's solar orientation, as if it were passing through something in deep space and relaying that data home through a keyhole built thousands of years ago. That forced the team to reverse a long-held assumption. What if the pyramids weren't built only for the stars their builders saw above? What if they were built because of something they believed would return? Using a time-coded resonance model, engineers ran a simulation. They reverse-fed the last 72 hours of Voyager's anomalous transmissions into the chamber's modeled structure, using the exact modulation intervals. What came back wasn't a simple frequency. It was imagery faint and trembling, like the chamber wasn't only reversing signals, but rendering them low resolution, blurred, incomplete. Yes, but unmistakably real. A geometric structure floating in space. Not a comet, not a probe. Something larger, rotating slowly. Lit by background stars that didn't match today's constellations, suggesting the image was either from the distant past or from a different time vector entirely. That's when whispers of an ancient signal lock began circulating. A fringe theory, once easy to dismiss, started to feel disturbingly persuasive. The Giza complex may have been built as an Earth-based receiver, waiting for a signal that couldn't be sent until humanity launched something far enough away to become a cosmic mirror. Voyager 1 didn't just reach interstellar space. It may have become the trigger for a message meant to be heard only when Earth was ready. And now, as the vacuum-sealed capsule prepared for physical opening timed to a narrow astronomical alignment just days away, only one question mattered. Is what's coming back meant for us? Or are we simply eavesdropping on an ancient conversation, one between Earth and something that never truly left it? The ground beneath the Giza Plateau has always harbored secrets. Beneath the polished limestone grandeur of the pyramids, tunnels, shafts, and voids have long whispered of a complexity too vast for traditional archaeology. But none of those discoveries prepared scientists for what they found beneath the southern boundary of the Great Pyramid, a corridor that wasn't carved through stone, but fused into it entirely composed of black obsidian, mirror-smooth, and seemingly untouched by time. It began when vibration sensors near the previously identified vacuum chamber started reporting anomalies. Seismic echoes suggested a passage extending deeper at a perfect diagonal with acoustics that behaved like no known material. The echoes returned enhanced, not muffled, as though the corridor amplified energy signatures instead of swallowing them. After weeks of careful excavation using non-invasive thermal fracturing to protect what lay below, the team revealed an arched corridor of mirror-finished obsidian, 30 meters long, descending at an angle of exactly 13 degrees. Not a single join or seam could be found. It was as though the corridor had been melted into existence, not assembled by human hands. On paper, obsidian is a terrible building material, brittle, sharp, untrustworthy under load. But this wasn't ordinary volcanic glass. Lab tests showed the obsidian had been fused with carbon nanostructures, forming a supermaterial, a glass with more tensile strength than titanium, yet capable of reflecting even subatomic particle traces along its surface. In other words, it was built to channel something invisible. When a remote rover entered the corridor, its sensors went erratic. Gyroscopes spun wildly. Magnetic compasses lost their sense of north. LiDAR collapsed into noise. But thermal cameras revealed something that made the room go quiet. The corridor was not inert. Heat signatures pulsed along the walls in regular intervals, as if the structure itself had a slow heartbeat. And then came the reflection. At exactly 0331 a.m., on December 20th, during a routine scan, one of the rover's cameras caught a shape in the obsidian, but it wasn't the rover's reflection. It was another object, seemingly suspended inside the wall itself, shaped like a tetrahedron, glowing faintly red. When researchers tried to magnify the image, the object shifted position on its own, and Voyager 1's signal spiked by 3 Hz. At the exact same moment, that synchronicity was no coincidence. It led to the boldest theory, yet the obsidian corridor wasn't a corridor at all. It was a dimensional mirror, perhaps even a stabilizing buffer between Earth and a structure not bound by our physical laws. The red tetrahedron might not exist here in our space. It might be a projection visible only when the right frequency strikes the corridor. More disturbing still was the realization that Voyager's pulse had triggered that visibility, meaning Voyager was not just observing something out there. It was communicating with something down here buried beneath our own history. They called it the Corridor of Reflection, not only for its mirror-black obsidian, but for what it forced us to consider. If the ancients had access to this, where did it come from? No known civilization could have forged carbon glass composites at this scale. The tunnel wasn't merely ancient. It may have been placed here before the human timeline even began. Now, standing at its dark mouth, bathed in soft thermal pulses and impossible reflections, scientists faced the ultimate boundary. Because the final 10 meters of the obsidian corridor descended into complete thermal silence, a dead zone colder than space, with zero emissions. A place no current instrument could scan. A place that did not feel like it belonged to our world. And the question became unavoidable: do we go in? At the terminus of the obsidian corridor, everything changes. Light vanishes, sound dies, and the senses, every single one, fail to return, even static. This is not darkness in the ordinary sense. It is subtraction, the removal of interaction between matter and measurement, a void that exists not as emptiness, but as resistance to being known. Scientists had no term for it, so they used a placeholder: zone null. Zone null was not inferred by sight or sound. It was proven by absence. A 10-meter descent into something that swallowed radar, thermal scans, gravity readings, and even atomic resonance. Instruments showed nothing, not air, not stone, not vacuum, only a blank where data should be. The last few frames from the rover showed a jagged cutoff. One moment, the corridor stretched forward, glistening with internal heat pulses. The next moment, nothing. No crash, no fade to black. The feed ended as though clipped from reality. Yet the onboard timer kept ticking for 12 more seconds before it finally shut down. And the interruption wasn't only local. It rippled outward through Earth's magnetic field, causing micro-fluctuations in the Van Allen belts. And a 4-second delay in synchronized atomic clocks in Belgium, Japan, and Antarctica. It was as if reality hiccuped, a tremor from a place it was never meant to touch. When researchers reconstructed the telemetry, they found something even stranger. The rover's accelerometer logged a loss of downward force. Gravity dropped to 0, but only inside zone null. This wasn't just emptiness. It was a region where motion itself stopped obeying familiar rules. And that's when Voyager 1's signal changed again. On December 20th, at exactly 4 a.m. GMT, just after the rover's disappearance, Voyager transmitted a perfect sine wave at 5.2 Hz, a frequency never seen in any previous transmission. Layered across that signal were patterns mimicking gravitational field lines, but inverted, as if describing a reverse topology of space-time. Experts at NASA's Deep Space Network were stunned. The frequency was clean, undistorted, and unbroken, lasting exactly 33 seconds, long enough to feel deliberate and calm enough to feel like a signature. That 33-second pulse coincided with a temporary polarity reversal in a subterranean magnetometer near the Giza structure. Polarity flips exist in physics, but to see one triggered in perfect sync with a signal from a spacecraft billions of kilometers away, that isn't coincidence. That is a handshake. Zone null was not merely a void. It might be a gateway, or worse, a barrier, a place constructed to hide, to protect, or to isolate something too foreign to coexist with our world. And the fact that it reacts to Voyager suggests it isn't dormant. It is listening. And now, perhaps, it is responding. Among the teams, speculation split into two trembling camps: curiosity and fear. Some believed Zone Null was an entrance to a non-terrestrial structure seeded before humanity rose. Others warned the zone was not meant for us, and that the loss of signal was not failure, but defense. The obsidian corridor could be a containment field, its smooth walls designed to hold in a physics we aren't built to survive. And then there was the most unsettling theory of all, that the zone isn't a static place. It's a sentient threshold, choosing what may pass. For now, the team halted all physical exploration, but remote sensing continued. And with each hour, the zone began emitting faint signatures of its own. Subsonic tremors, electromagnetic field rotations, quantum fluctuations measurable only with prototype instruments. Zone Null was no longer silent. The final frame from the rover was sealed and archived under a new classification, Transmission 22, Event Horizon below Giza. Because whatever lies beyond that obsidian edge isn't merely deeper than Earth, it is deeper than reality itself. And so we arrive at the edge of the known. We traced a signal from the outer frontier of our solar system. We followed its resonance back to Earth, to a single point beneath the oldest and most mysterious monument on the planet, the Great Pyramid of Giza. We examined gravitational pulses, thermal voids, subharmonic structures, and the startling shift in Voyager 1's broadcast cadence. We laid bare the facts, not myth, not recycled legend, but data. Repeating, cross-confirmed, and undeniable. The implications are staggering. A spacecraft designed in the 1970 seconds, drifting in deep interstellar space, registered a density pattern that matches a cubic void beneath Giza perfectly. A void no radar can penetrate. A region that radiates no heat. A place where time, mass, and resonance behave in ways we cannot yet explain. And still, the pulses continue every 6 hours without fail. These aren't tremors. They aren't seismic noise. They are organized, measured, intentional. Whatever lies beneath the plateau is active. And Voyager responded to it. For the first time in its 48-year mission, the probe deviated by microseconds in its signal loop. This was not decay, not cosmic ray interference. It was reaction, a subtle adjustment, as if some primitive system recognized a rhythm and leaned closer to listen. Which begs the quiet, terrifying question: what kind of structure buried under Giza could reach into deep space at all? We have searched the skies for extraterrestrial signals for decades, scanning radio bands, microwaves, gravitational lenses, but we rarely turn the lens inward, toward Earth, toward the idea that the anomaly we seek out there may have been under our feet the whole time. Now we know this. There is something there. A structure unmapped by modern technology, a formation that reflects energy with impossible precision. It absorbs thermal change like a cryogenic core and returns harmonic ratios consistent with engineered resonant cavities. This isn't just geology. It's engineering, and it's deep. The more data we gather, the more it feels like we're dealing with a machine of stone, buried under layers of sediment, history, and denial. Its angles are too exact, its pulses too regular, its magnetic decay too slow to be natural. NASA won't comment. The European Space Agency has released no full thermal imaging since December 18th, and Voyager's most recent data log, usually public in near real time, has been offline for over 36 hours. That has never happened before. But there is one thing no blackout can erase. The signal exists. Independent receivers caught it. Ground-based observatories in New Zealand, Chile, and Oman reported the same frequency echo within a 0.1 margin. This wasn't malfunction, it was convergence. 3 events happened together. Voyager's frequency shifted. A cold gravitational cube beneath Giza activated, and global sensors aligned on a new origin, point Earth. Now the silence is louder than ever. We stand at the brink of a paradigm shift. Because this isn't only about a buried object or a misunderstood pyramid complex. It's about the relationship between Earth and the tools we send into space to understand it. Voyager wasn't built to receive, but it did, which leads to one final consideration. Was this always the mission? Did the engineers who designed the probe imagine a day when, billions of miles from home, it would listen instead of speak? A moment when it would act not just as messenger, but as mirror. Voyager 1 has crossed into uncharted territory, not because of how far it has traveled, but because of what it has brought back. A signal, a structure, and a silence too perfect to ignore. As we close this chapter, remember this: every tool we build, every probe we launch, every particle we track is a reflection of our oldest question. Are we alone? And yet the real answer may be even stranger. Have we ever looked properly beneath us? The Earth is old, older than the pyramids, older than Voyager, older than memory. Beneath its crust lie layers of stone, voids, metals, and secrets lost to time. But now, for the first time, space has pointed back to Earth, not to the sky, but to Giza, to something impossible, to a structure that listens and answers. We don't know who built it, we don't know why it waited, and we don't know what happens next. But Voyager heard it, and now, so have we. Thank you for watching. If this story stirred something in you, if it opened new questions or quietly shifted your sense of what's possible, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes exploration is more than looking outward. Sometimes, to discover the truth, we have to look back and far below, because maybe the greatest message from the stars was buried in our own soil all along. Stay curious, stay listening, and never stop wondering what else lies beneath.